Hey guys, Arleesha here and welcome to another video. Today we're gonna paint something big, and then we're gonna paint something bigger, and then we're gonna paint something bigger, and I don't know how big we're gonna get. I mean, I technically do because I have the canvases. So Arteza reached out to me again and asked if I wanted to try some more of their products. I've tried their watercolors, I've tried their gouache, but I haven't tried their acrylic paints yet. So I thought this could be a really fun opportunity to do some more expressive, experimental acrylic exploration. So Arteza sent me these fun little packs of acrylic paint that are kind of fun to squeeze. And I'm going to be using these along with a series of canvas panels that they sent me. This is exciting because the smallest panel is 9 by 12 inches. To give you guys a gauge for that size, here's an 8 by 10 panel that is a piece that I'll probably never finish because I was just playing around. And here is a 9 by 12 panel. So you can see this one is a little bit bigger than this one. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be starting with the 9 by 12 panel and working in panel sizes increasingly larger until we get to the biggest panel size. So we're going to be just making increasingly larger pieces of art, and I'm really excited. So let's go! So we're going to get started with the 9 by 12 panel. This is a pretty comfy working surface size for me. So in setting out the colors that I wanted to use for today, I ended up choosing titanium white, yellow ochre, scarlet red, burnt sienna, and in the end decided to swap out ultramarine blue and use phthalo blue instead. I really like these little squeezy pouches. They remind me of like what you might have like kids' applesauce or something in. I mean, that's what we did for my kids anyway. They're pretty fun to squeeze, and an interesting thing about this particular set of acrylics is that, as far as I know, it's one of the few products on Arteza where you can actually buy individual refills. So if you ran out of one color and you wanted to get more titanium white, for example, you can go onto their website and you can actually just buy that one single color, which is really nice and not usually the case with a lot of Arteza's paints. So it's nice that you can get that one. If you guys are interested in either the paints or the canvas panels or any of the other products that I am using today, you can find links to those down in the description. And Arteza has also been kind enough to give my viewers a 10% coupon code, which is like Arlie Bean with a number after it. What's the number? I don't remember. It's on the screen. It's in the description. So you guys can find links to all of those products down in the description if you're interested in anything when you're using anything, you can check it out. So starting with the 9 by 12 panel, I would say these are like soft body acrylics. I had worked with some heavy body acrylics before. I'm still relatively inexperienced when it comes to acrylic paints. And can we just like pause the entire world for a second so I can show you guys this adorable little note my daughter brought me while I was working? She just cut out this little heart, wrote "I love mom" on it, and brought it up to me while I was working, and it was the sweetest thing and a very welcome, kind of interruption to the workday. Anyway, she's adorable. I love those little people. And painting, is that what we were doing? Are we working on painting? I kind of had relatively loose ideas for what I wanted for each piece. I sketched each one directly with some watered down acrylic paints and then, just painted over top of them. One thing I really enjoy about acrylics is that you can use them at a bunch of different consistencies, so you can water them down to be used more like watercolors if you want to technically, or you could technically use that watered down state to glaze on top of thicker paint because it's not going to reactivate the paint like gouache would because it dries permanent. So once the paint dries, you're not going to be able to reactivate it again. Like with gouache though, I generally tend to use this paint pretty thick. I don't do a lot of watering down, and the watering down is actually pretty difficult on these canvas panels because it works a lot better with watercolor paper if you were gonna water down your paint. Again, I'm a relative beginner when it comes to working with acrylics, but I definitely really enjoy working with them fairly opaquely like this. I wasn't planning on making any of these pieces massively detailed or spending a ton of time on them. My original intention was to paint all 3 of them in one day. There are technically 4 canvas panel sizes in this set. We are going to be using the 9x12, the 12x16, and the 16x20. There's also an 11x14 that we're not going to be using. I just wanted to do 3 paintings for this video. And I ended up doing most of them in one day. I started the last piece and then finished it the next day. So 2 days to paint all 3 of these. With our 9x12 piece finished, we're ready to move on to our larger 12x16 piece. This one you can see takes up a lot more room on my little tabletop easel thing here that I am using. I really like this tabletop easel. It's so perfect for working opaquely like this. And once again, I'm using pretty watered down paint to do my loose sketch. Even though acrylics are an opaque medium, it's the same thing with gouache or any medium that's opaque. The opacity is going to vary depending on the pigments that are used. So this red is not a fully opaque color like titanium white or yellow ochre would be. So when it's watered down, it's going to have a little bit more transparency. And I also noticed that this canvas panel kind of repels the super wet paint just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. And that's why you get that sort of spotty texture where the wet paint doesn't want to stick to the panel as much. This was one of my favorite parts in this entire painting process for all of these pieces, was blending out the background on this particular piece. When working with the paints in this very loose stage, they actually didn't dry so quickly that I couldn't blend stuff out. So while I was working on this background over the course of several minutes, I was able to blend these colors together, and you can see a bit of that shine as the paint is still wet, and I could just choose how much I wanted these colors to melt into one another, where I wanted to leave lots of brush strokes, where I wanted to blend things out a little bit more. And I found them to be really flexible in that way, probably even more than the heavy body acrylics that I personally had worked with before. There was just a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more time to blend those colors together. When it comes to actually reviewing these paints and talking about the quality of them, I'm not a master at acrylic paints. These are kind of the only soft-bodied acrylics that I have ever used, mostly with the exception of, modeling acrylics that I used to paint like board game miniatures several years ago. But I've kind of been thinking about art supplies as fitting into one of 3 categories, whether it's acrylics or watercolors or gouache or anything. The lowest tier would just be paints that get in your way, meaning paints that are of such a low quality that they get in your way of learning how to use the medium, how to learn about color, and even though they're very cheap, usually, you can't actually do much learning with them. And I've talked about a few of these products before. In that middle tier would be paints that don't get in your way. So they're not like, naturally crazy special on their own, but the paints work and you can do almost anything with them if you're willing to put in the time to learn them. You're not going to be wasting your time working with paints at this tier because they're going to serve you. They're going to work for you and you can learn with them. The highest tier that I've just been building this little mental ladder of, I guess, the highest tier would be paints that shine on their own. So paints that are of a very high, unique quality, and they just, whether you're just swatching something out or doing really loose things, whatever it is, the quality of the paints speaks for itself. Generally speaking, Arteza products tend to fall in that middle category for me. So they don't necessarily get in your way, but at the same time, when we talk about Daniel Smith watercolors, they have this incredible luminosity to them, very high quality, lots of beautiful granulation. They have all of their lovely Primatech colors. Those colors, those paints shine on their own, as do several other brands. And these acrylic paints, I don't necessarily think, but then again, I don't have a ton of experience with acrylics, as I said. There's nothing about them where I, was laying down a color and I went, wow, this is like the most amazing phthalo blue I've ever seen in my entire life. They're good. They're nice. The colors are all vibrant and mix well. The colors are relatively clean too. I think most of the colors max out at like 2 pigments. used in each color, so you're not getting super muddy colors. Here's a larger piece I had done with this largest 16 by 20 panel. If you were there for my last live stream, you may remember this piece. This is the piece that we painted together. And anyway, I think that these Arteza paints fall very soundly into that middle category where they're not going to get in your way. You can learn on them. You can do almost anything with these paints, and they're going to serve you. They're going to work for you, and they're good acrylic paints. They're nice quality. I didn't notice anything that made me go, oh man, these paints would be better if this was happening. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have anything that I felt was really getting in my way. And that's how I felt about most of Arteza's art supplies, with the exception, I would say the least favorite of the supplies that I've used would probably be the watercolor pans. They were all right, but they had a bit of a chalky opacity to them. That's just not something that I prefer in my watercolors, and I feel like the budget quality shined through a little bit more on those. And they just kind of left me as, thinking of it as something that I wasn't really going to continue to use for myself. These acrylic paints, however, there's nothing wrong with them. They're good, solid paints. And I can't see why, if I was going to sit down and use acrylic paints, why I wouldn't use these ones. They're good. I like them. I also really appreciate that it's not a massive 60 color set. You can get a massive 60 color Arteza acrylic set. Those will be smaller tubes of paint, similar to the watercolor and gouache sets, but I love this 14 color set, and I think it kind of gives you everything you need. There are even a couple of metallic colors included in this set. I think it's a silver and a gold. I don't use metallic colors very often. If you guys were there for the live stream where I was testing out these paints, you'll know that I get a little bit grumpy about metallic colors. I feel like using metallic paints for me kind of flattens out a piece. I would rather, if I was going to do some sort of metallic effect, figure out how to paint it my own and add lots of dimension. So while I'm grateful that those metallic colors are there, and I know that there are people who will love them and who will use them, I'm not really one of those people, which is totally fine, because if I do use the other colors and I run out of them, I can always, purchase refills of individual colors. It is more expensive, by the pouch to buy refills as opposed to buying the entire set, which is understandable. It's going to be cheaper to buy these paints in bulk in a set altogether than it's going to be to buy the individual little squeezy pouches. To talk about the pieces I've been creating so far, they were all really loose ideas, really loose concepts. And this last one was the only one that I took a little bit of time to think about and plan a little bit before I started. So I sketched out my idea in my sketchbook, which you may have already seen at this point, that little sketch that I may have had in the background. And I did that in my watercolor sketchbook, and then I actually just watered down some acrylic paints to test out some colors. I ended up varying the colors very much from what I had in that sketch in my sketchbook, but I'm really glad that I did it, because I wanted to make sure I could better visualize the concept overall before I started painting. Because this was the biggest one, I wanted to take advantage of the added space. Speaking of which, my brain originally told me that because I was going to be working on increasingly larger pieces, that my pieces had to be increasingly complex. So I was putting a lot of stress on myself, saying, well, if it's going to get bigger, then you have to include more elements, and you have to, why would you do on a 16 by 20 panel the same thing you could have done on a 9 by 12 panel? And I quickly disregarded that as complete nonsense and something that I wasn't going to stress myself out about. One of the things that's difficult to communicate in a video and that you can't see super well is that the larger the piece is, it just has more presence. When you're looking at this 16 by 20 panel and you have it in a room, it just strikes you more than the smaller, quote unquote smaller 9 by 12 panel, which is still, not a super tiny size. So even though I could have done on this largest panel, I could have done the same thing on a smaller panel, I really like having a concept like this at this large size. It's really fun, actually. I will say, though, that this last piece does creep me out a tiny bit. I mean, I know I do a lot of surreal subject matters and things that could be viewed as a little bit creepy kind of all the time. The only time that my art really creeps me out is when I use myself as reference. So I took a reference photo of this head angle in this last piece, and the result is kind of like in a sci-fi movie when like the alien like steals somebody's face and sticks it in a place that it doesn't belong. That's kind of how I feel about this, because when I look at this piece, I'm like, why is my face on that panel? It's creeping me out. And I mean, I'm not even saying that I did a perfect job at capturing my own likeness, but I just look and I go, somebody stole my face and stuck it on there. It just creeps me out just a little bit. I mean, of all the things I've ever created in my life, to say that my own face on a panel is what creeps, I know it's a little bit weird. Anyway, hey, look at that. We've got 3 paintings now. I like these paints, guys. I like these panels. I'm so grateful to have them because they're kind of the perfect set of materials for exploring and experimenting, and they're fun. I like them. I'm happy with them. If you guys are interested in checking out any of these materials, just head on down over to that there description area. There's all the links down there, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful, wonderful everything. Bye!